Welcome, Crestron fans. This is the first episode of CLC TV. I'm your host, Ian Austin, and I am joined here in the studio by a very special guest, one of the senior engineers here at Crestron on the commercial lighting team, Mr. Leo Guerrero. Leo, thanks for coming in today.
Yep, glad to be here.
So, Leo, I wanted you to come in because I know you're on the team that heads up the Zoom platform here at Crestron. And we've got some pretty exciting stuff coming out.
Yep, that's right.
So I know I've got a couple of products here in front of me. We've got the Zoom DALI J-Box, which I know a lot of people have been looking forward to seeing because we showed it at Light Fair. We've got the Zoom Emergency Junction Box coming out, as well as the firmware update that will allow us to have more functionality from our Zoom keypads.
That is correct.
So, I mean, let's just jump right into it. Let's talk about DALI, because I know this is something that I'm super excited about, because DALI is one of those things that's been around for a long time, but it's kind of fallen from grace recently over maybe the past decade, and I know certain manufacturers kind of hung their hat on DALI, or a form of DALI. So what can people expect from Crestron DALI? And what is DALI exactly?
Well, the DALI stands for Digitally Addressable Lighting Interface, and basically it's a protocol, it's a standard that was created and is very used a lot in Europe, okay. Which allows you to control typically lighting devices with two wires. Via the two wires, you can send and receive information.
So two communication wires, really, it's a communication bus.
Correct.
The two DALI wires. So I know a lot of people, historically have kind of, shied away from DALI because of potentially some extended labor that was required to make that communication bus work, right?
Yes, yeah.
Because you have to address fixtures, and you have to, then once you've addressed those fixtures, you got to figure out where they're at, and then you got to write your programming for zoning and grouping and all that kind of stuff. So how is the Zoom topology going to change that, and how is this going to be a more powerful adaptation of DALI?
Well, DALI traditionally was very painful. You had to do a lot of calisthenics, running around, use radios, try to figure out where the fixture is, identify, and then start grouping everything together. The idea behind Zoom Wireless DALI is to simplify that. The price point of the device is such that you can have many more in the space, reducing the number of devices that will be actually connected to the DALI J-Box. And also allowing the user to single-handedly, one person, no radios, to go into the space, use the Zoom app, and commission by themselves.
So we're getting away from the guy on the bucket in the electrical closet on the radio talking to the helper that's running around playing Battleship, really, in a sense. Right. So, and you mentioned the price point. So really what we're doing is we're taking the traditional topology of a power pack, and we're putting DALI communication inside that power pack?
Yes, that is correct.
So if I had a space and I wanted to max out, which I would traditionally do on a DALI loop, you can have up to 64 addresses on a DALI loop.
That is correct.
So I'm probably not going to want to do that here. I'm probably going to want to put my 5 or 10 or 15 fixtures that are in a space on that DALI loop.
That is correct. This is a room level control, which is added to any Zoom room. So if you have several fixtures in the room, some of them are DALI, some of them are not, you throw this on there and you'll be able to control the DALI devices.
Okay, so really what I'm doing is I really just want to, from a simplicity standpoint for the commissioning of the space, I just want to have a single J-box in a space where I can see all of my fixtures.
That is correct.
So then I can walk around with the app and address these fixtures at the touch of a button, and then group them together or zone them together.
That is correct.
All from the app, and I don't have to worry about being upstairs or downstairs or down a hallway in another room.
Right.
I can just put more J-boxes on my system.
That is correct. Some people may not even need to address. If you only have 1 or 2 devices and you don't mind controlling them simultaneously, there's no need for addressing. You just throw the J-Box DALI into space and it will automatically control.
Excellent. That's fantastic. So you mentioned a 2-wire bus. Something else has a 2-wire bus, 0 to 10 volt. And I know DALI is somewhat the 0 to 10 volt of Europe. I know it's been around for a long time and it's very popular there. So DALI has a 2-wire bus, 0 to 10 volt has a 2-wire bus, but that's pretty much where they stop being similar, right?
Yes. The 0 to 10 volt control is a voltage level control, which means if you send out a voltage of 5 volts, all the fixtures that are connected to that 0 to 10 will go to 50%. With DALI, because it's a digital protocol, you can control each fixture individually. The 0 to 10 is polarized. So when you're doing installation and wiring, if you don't get the polarization correct, if you connect the negative with the positive, things don't go very well.
I know. I've heard horror stories out there in the field where a contractor says, your product doesn't work, and I can't believe you sold me this junk, just to find out that they put a purple on a gray wire and a gray on a purple wire, and everything from there stopped.
That is correct.
And so really, we can alleviate that potential headache out in the field by having a non-polarity specific protocol. That's bidirectional, whereas 0 to 10 volt is just singular, right? In terms of direction, you're sending commands out to a fixture, and it's doing those commands.
Yep.
So actually, we can get status of driver life potentially, and lamp status.
That is correct.
Using DALI.
It's also much more versatile for installing. You can use star topology. You can use daisy chain, or a mix of both when you're wiring the DALI wires.
So really, what we've done is we've taken a junction box form factor. We've taken the relay out of that junction box because now we don't have a switch leg running through this, unlike 0 to 10 volt. So really, this DALI junction box controller is just getting power to power itself.
And then sending out the control signals on the wire.
Two control wires that are sending out communication and receiving communication back from the fixtures attached to it are connected to it. So technically, because my power is coming from a panel box, not from a junction box controller or a power pack, I can have multiple voltages in a single space, all being controlled by the same DALI controller.
That is correct. You can go across different phases, across different voltages, and use the same control signal to control all those devices. So if you have in one space one fixture that's powered by 277, another fixture that's powered by 120, or several fixtures that are 120 and they're all different phases, you can still use the same control signal or the control wires to each one of those fixtures.
Now that's super powerful, because I know in a lot of installations you might have your general illumination in the building that's 277, running on 277 circuits, and then the lighting designer wants to have some decorative pendants or some accent lighting that's going to run through a low voltage transformer, and that's only going to be 120 volt, or maybe some track heads or something like that. And that's going to be 120 volt. And now you're going to have, even if you want them operating at the same time, you're going to have 2 different power packs, because one's going to be 277 and one's going to be 120. So really, we can just feed these from their separate circuits coming from the panel. But controlling them with the same J-box in that space, and now we can group them or zone them digitally using the Zoom app.
And you can find all sorts of different types of controls. You have LED or low voltage, or you have phase control DALI devices that are controllable via DALI.
That's fantastic. So one of the things that I like about DALI is the fact that it's bidirectional in communication, and you get that return communication that, hey, something is working or something is not working. But one of the things that kind of mystifies a lot of people about, well, controls in general is emergency. So how does emergency work with DALI?
Well, the great thing about DALI is that all DALI devices, by the standard, have to have a programmable emergency level that they're supposed to go to in case of power loss or control loss. So when power is lost in the space, all devices will go to what's called the emergency level. And that is fully programmable from the app.
So this is a predetermined level that if I wanted to have it go to 100% on certain fixtures, I can do that. And then in other fixtures that are on a different DALI loop, I can have them go to a completely different level. Let's say an egress path. I might want to have those going to 100%, yet classrooms or private offices or something like that, maybe I want to have that 50%.
And many people actually use that. We've had a situation in a hospital where they didn't want the lights going on to 100% during a power loss situation, and they wanted the lights to go to a maximum of 40%, and we made that happen.
Wow. So, and speaking of hospitals, I know DALI is powerful, but I think in this form factor, I think this is really where the rubber meets the road. Traditionally, in a hospital solution, if I had 8 zones in a hospital room that were 0 to 10 volt, I would need at least 8 power packs. Right? But using DALI in this form factor, I'm just going to have a single power pack.
Just a single power pack and keypads.
So keypads and sensors as needed.
Probably occupancy sensors.
Yep, and do those count towards the DALI addresses or no?
The keypads and occupancy sensors count towards the room devices, which is the Zoom devices.
Okay, so that's on the
not
Zoom
the
mesh.
DALI addresses.
So that's the Zoom mesh topology device
Correct.
count, the max of 32 in a space.
Correct.
Not the DALI addresses,
which you can have up to 64.
Up to 64, right. So really what we're looking at is traditional DALI rules, up to 64 addresses on a DALI loop, and then I can group up to 15.
That is correct.
So a DALI group is the same as a zone, which would traditionally be a 0 to 10 volt switch leg, or a switching switch leg, except because we don't have any switch legs, we're just connecting all these devices with the communication protocol, and then digitally using the app, going through and grouping or zoning our fixtures at that point.
Right, up to 15 groups, 64 addresses.
So the customer is going to have the ultimate flexibility in a space if they want to change zones or if they want to add a fixture or take away a fixture. They can easily do that without having to rewire the entire space.
That is correct. If you need to isolate certain fixtures and say, I want these to work together, and you need to dynamically change it, you could do it very easy via the app.
So what happens when a fixture fails in the field? I know that's always been a sticking point with some people. Do I have to get the programmer back out there?
Not with Zoom.
Not with Zoom? Do I just go into the app and I just hit a
Go
button?
into the app, you look at the menu, and you're able to resolve the missing address.
Really? So I can just give that one troffer or that one downlight a new address and then life's back to normal?
Yep, and if you had grouping, you add it to whichever group it worked before or replace the fixture that you have.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's really powerful. So back to the emergency, one of the other products that we're coming out with that you guys have been working hard on is the Zoom Emergency J-Box.
Correct.
So this is something that is not unforeign or not unfamiliar to the people out there using shunt relays.
Yes.
Right. So how is this different than a shunt relay?
Well, a shunt relay typically will provide emergency feed to a fixture and send the fixture to 100% during emergency situations like power loss. We essentially do the same thing with the emergency J-Box.
Okay. So this is really just another junction box sitting on your emergency circuit and sensing for a loss of phase?
That is correct. When power is lost, we're able to tell that power has been lost, and we will go into emergency mode, sending the fixture to 100% and not allowing any user control for 90 minutes.
So this is not a transfer device. That's happening upstream.
Correct.
So the transfer device is telling it to go from normal to emergency power source.
The J-Box emergency J-Box. The J-Box.
the emergency junction box.
The emergency junction box should be controlled by a transfer switch, or it should be connected to a transfer switch.
That's upstream. Okay,
Correct.
so this is not a transfer device. This is just this is a UL924 listed junction box.
Yes.
And so what it's doing, unlike the DALI where you've got a pre-programmable emergency setting, we're just cutting the 0 to 10 volt and going to 100%, or we're sending 100% to the 0 to 10 volt?
That is correct. All fixtures that are connected to this will go to 100% as stated, and they will not be controllable for 90 minutes.
90 minutes. Okay, so that's my time period is 90 minutes to meet code. And then let's say power's restored. Normal power comes back on. Do I have to wait my 90 minutes before my emergency fixtures go back to their last state?
No, we're continuously listening for normal power devices that are part of the room.
Okay.
And once we start getting information and communication from normal power devices, we know that power has been restored, and we'll go back to operating in normal mode.
Okay, so we're not just throwing an emergency junction box in a space and saying this solves all my problems.
Correct.
We're pairing this in just like a shunt relay would be, but we're not shunting anything.
Correct.
We're just using another junction box with a different type of firmware in it that's that's a little bit smarter than the rest, so to speak.
Yes,
and it's sitting on the emergency circuit. So if I had 3 zones in a space and I had 2 emergency fixtures in each zone, I would have my normal junction boxes that are providing normal power and control via keypads and sensors, and then I would, just like shunt relays, I would have my 3 emergency J-boxes powering those fixtures.
Yes, so you need 1 emergency J-box per zone.
Okay.
That's emergency.
Yep.
and you need your normal 0 to 10 volt controls.
Now, let's say I wanted to get kind of fancy with this and I wanted to bind or pair a keypad just with my emergency fixtures. Can I do that?
Yes, you can. You can control the emergency J-Box just like any other non-emergency J-Box. It can be paired to a keypad. You can make it part of a zone and customize it as you wish.
So I know there's other products on the market like this from other manufacturers that require a sensing wire to connect my normal and my emergency power packs together so that they can sense when that loss happens and they switch from one to another. What wires do I need to connect on this from my normal and my emergency?
Well, unlike other devices and solutions that are out there that do require a wire, we do everything wirelessly.
So we're taking advantage of the Zoom mesh topology
Yes.
to wirelessly communicate in that space with other devices. So really, to make this work, I need a normally powered AC device in a space,
That is correct.
and then my emergency powered AC device in that space.
That is correct.
And then those two can communicate via the wireless topology, the Zoom mesh wireless topology, instead of having conduit connecting emergency and normal conduit.
Right, we detect that normal power has been restored wirelessly.
Oh, that's fantastic. So speaking of keypads, the last thing that we wanted to talk about is something that we brought up to Crestron users out there at Lightfair, which was a firmware update that gives us the ability to custom program our Zoom keypads. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Right, the new firmware update for the Zoom system allows you to program each button on the keypad.
So traditionally, if I had 3 zones in a space, and I wanted to have scene control over those 3 zones, I would need 3 separate keypads.
That is correct.
And now, with the firmware update, I can go in and I can custom select my buttons and tell it what it's going to do.
Yes, each button, you can make it recall a scene, you can toggle a zone or a group of devices, or make it raise and lower, or report information to the AV bridge.
And I can do all 3 of those different things from
one keypad.
From one keypad. Wow. So this is actually taking the wireless topology and giving it the feature subset that we would normally find almost like in a Cameo keypad.
That is correct.
Wow. At a great price point and an installation that's it's super easy because since there's no wires, there's no junction box required.
Yep.
There's no back box for this. So this is going to be available on the 4-button and the 6-button keypad?
Yes, it's available for any of the keypads.
Okay, so this is a new firmware that we're rolling we're rolling out in a rolling change. Say that 3 times real fast. This is a new firmware that we're rolling out. So what happens if I've got a pre-existing Zoom installation and I want is my older Zoom system going to continue to work?
Yes, all the functionality and logic that you've already programmed in your system is still retained. You don't lose any of that.
Okay, so if it worked yesterday, it's going to work tomorrow.
That is correct.
But if I bought these new Zoom devices tomorrow, I can take advantage of this new firmware.
That is correct.
And start using the button keypad functionality and Zoom DALI and the Zoom emergency junction box.
Right.
So let's say I've got a pre-existing Zoom installation and I want this new functionality.
All you have to do is update.
So from the Zoom hub, from the floor hub, you would go in and click on the update firmware button.
That is correct, and it will deploy to all the devices.
So it's going to broadcast this new firmware that it's sucking down from Crestron, right?
Yep.
From outer space, it's sucking all this new firmware down and sending it out to all of my older Zoom devices.
Yep.
So I can have this new functionality on my older system.
That is correct. It's as simple as downloading also the latest app, double tapping the button that you wish to program, and then selecting the functionality you want for that button.
So I go into the Play Store or iTunes, and I just make sure my app is updated and I've got the latest version.
That is correct.
I send the new firmware out via the Zoom hub to my devices, and I've basically got a new Zoom system.
That is correct.
Wow, that's some powerful stuff. So, Zoom DALI, Zoom JBox emergency mode, and keypad toggle and firmware update. Those are 3 very powerful things that are coming at you really soon. Leo, thank you so much today for coming by. And you folks out there, come back and see us for more content on CLC TV.